TopMed Talk.
Welcome to TopMed Talk, the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, evidence-based perioperative medicine. I'm here to tell you super early bird registration ends on the 31st of January for EBPOM World Congress 2006. It takes place between the 7th and the 9th of July at the British Library in London. 3 days of evidence-based perioperative medicine, global insights, and expert debate featuring speakers including Michael Marmot and Ken Rockwood. Super early bird registration ends on the 31st of January. Register now at ebpom.org.
Hello, welcome back to TopMed Talk. I'm Andy Cumpsty and I'm here with my co-host Kate Leslie at the annual general meeting for the British Journal of Anaesthesia, which this year is being held in Dublin in Ireland. It's a great place to be, isn't it, Kate?
It's beautiful. We're on the Dunleary Harbour, which has got some fantastic piers where the Irish are out fishing strenuously, and it's actually a sunny day and we can see the boats and ferries going in and out to England.
I went out for a walk yesterday evening to the end of the East Pier. Quite big piers, huge breakwaters. There were lots of people out running in the sun, out with their fishing rods. Lots of people just out enjoying the sunshine, having a really nice time.
And meanwhile, we're in here doing journal stuff, which is one of our favourite things to do.
It's a really interesting meeting, isn't it? Because there's clearly operational work to get through, but there's also a really great group of people here who've got lots of experience from all different corners of the world in all sorts of aspects of the whole business of journals and publishing, from editors such as yourself, the trustees who oversee the financial sides, and also our social media experts, which leads us into today's guest.
Indeed. So we're very lucky to have Tom Abbott here with us. Tom, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
My name is Tom Abbott. I'm a clinical senior lecturer in anaesthesia and a consultant anaesthetist at Queen Mary University of London in the UK, and I'm the social media editor for the BJA and BJA Open journals.
So kicking off, what is social media?
So I think the social media is hard to define, but we could define it as a collection of apps or online dissemination tools, including well-known platforms like X, formerly Twitter, newer platforms like Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, platforms for communicating originally in a social fashion, sort of taken over by all different types of commercial interests and, from our perspective, scientific interests also.
And how did you become interested in social media in the first place?
Well, back during my academic training, during my PhD, it feels like a long time ago now, so probably 10 years ago, we noticed that particularly funding organisations were interested in alternative means of science communication, particularly in communicating our research to members of the public and patients, but also to other clinicians who might be interested in our research that wasn't just traditional academic publishing. And there was a growing market in communicating on social media channels. So as part of my research training, the dissemination training included talking about my work on social media, but also on the web, as a way of broadening the reach of our research. I think that's quite important for academics because it has become increasingly important, and the way that universities, particularly in the UK, and funding bodies look at alternative metrics of research outputs and dissemination.
And what are the key alternative metrics that universities or hospitals or grant bodies, which metrics are they most interested in relation to social media?
There's two main proprietary metrics. One is altmetric, which was the original metric, and then other publishing organisations use PlumX, which is the one that we use at the BJA because that's owned by Elsevier, which is the publisher. But they have commonality in the way that their sort of proprietary scoring system works to generate an overall sort of metric score, and that includes traditional publishing in terms of citations, but also views on various platforms, and they differ according to which platforms are included in both, but common areas are X, formerly Twitter, LinkedIn and Facebook.
Interesting. Have you looked at your altmetric score recently, Andy?
I'm embarrassed to say I haven't. I feel now that I ought to, but I think thinking about how it impacts us as clinicians, researchers, publishers, or patients, I mean, that's 4 different groups who probably all interact with those social media services very differently. So we talk about the altmetric score as a sort of researcher output or potentially a funder metric of interest. But I mean, is that really a metric of relevance to the clinician or the patients, or are there other metrics we should be using in those groups?
I think it's one of the only metrics that we have to sort of quantify, particularly for universities and funders. But I think my sort of interest in the relevance of social media is a lot more about the way that clinicians and scientists interact with research. If you go back 10 years or even 8 years, one of the main ways that people would interact with research was because they got a journal through the door. And if you're a member of a society, you would be subscribed to their journal. It was the same for the BJA. Almost all of the journals now are online, and certainly at BJA, we've been online only in the UK now for 2 years. And we have BJA Open, which is an online open access journal. The only interaction that the consumers of research, clinicians and scientists, and some patients will be interacting through the website or on social media. The majority of my clinician colleagues, they don't routinely go to the BJA website. They get an email from the college every month saying there's a new issue. It's a coin toss whether they'll actually click through to access our content. The main way that they'll see our content is because they're scrolling on their phone on one of many social media platforms, and something will pop up that interests them. And I really want us to try in science to move towards the position from the scientists that the main shop front for your research is social media, because that's how the majority of people interact with it. The downstream effect, a link clicks through to your paper, to the PDF, or the sort of traditional sort of metrics of consumption, citations, etc. But the main way people see it now is mainly social media.
It's interesting you mentioned patients. We have many non-medical people as subscribers to Top Med Talk, and they listen to our podcast in the car and while they're traveling and doing things, and quite often they're sort of peripherally engaged with the healthcare industry in some way, or they're just people who, nerdy, sciencey types. And it really, I think it's part of our role in improving health literacy overall. It's not like, I don't think clinicians get a flurry of people coming in, well, I heard on Top Med Talk that, this was a great drug and I want to receive it. But I think we want the British Journal of Anaesthesia's content to benefit as many people as possible, as all journals do.
Exactly. And as a scientist, as a researcher, I want my work to be disseminated as widely as possible and have the biggest impact. And I think social media really enhances that reach in a way that sort of previous ways of viewing content are now becoming obsolete.
So we've painted a rosy picture of how great social media is, but there are challenges, aren't there? What are the principal ones that are concerning you as a social media editor at the moment?
I think there are operational challenges, and then there's challenges in the way that sort of content is viewed. So operationally, there are many platforms, and it's hard to be consistent across all platforms, particularly because the way in which it's presented is different. So you have to change slightly the presentation for each platform. For example, Instagram is predominantly video media and visual media. LinkedIn is different. X, formerly Twitter, has a limited character count. So whilst you can produce a post that meets all the requirements, you need to tweak them for the different platforms. And so to have a broad reach, it is time consuming to generate. To have a professional social media offering, there is investment required in order to sort of present a glossy visual image or a visual abstract. Or if you're doing videos, there is some video editing required. So for a journal like the BJA, the service that we offer our authors is to provide that professional outlook. I think there's also concerns around the way that these platforms are policed and the way that consumers of content interact with it, and then the discussions which happen downstream. In the traditional model, where somebody had a comment on a paper, it would be submitted to the journal as a correspondence, and then that would be reviewed. That doesn't happen with social media. There's a lot more real-time interaction and commenting, and that is both great because it allows a very timely response, but there's not the review that previously would have happened.
I think you've highlighted two really critical points that probably need a bit more in-depth discussion there. So the first one is the immediacy of the content. And that clearly has a big role in amplifying the impact that social media is having with the dissemination process. And I think actually I'd put Top Med Talk and podcasting in with that. But one of the first things which sort of appealed to me from the podcasting side was how quickly what we record can be broadcast to people listening, and that immediacy of impact is actually quite startling. It's the same with social media in in many different ways. But the flip side of that is you talk about the policing of the content. I'm not going into specifics, but there's news stories out just this week about content and how reliable certain things are or not, and evidence-based practice, and which are getting rapid responses from colleges around the world, from news industries. Social media is part of that misinformation or news information process now. It's affecting people every day. How do we ensure, if you like, the scientific rigor, the scientific quality that authors and scientists are working really hard to achieve is still deliverable through an immediate social media sort of outlet?
I think one of the things that can support science communication in general is that being disseminated through trusted organizations like established journals. So I hope that when a patient or a clinician or a scientist sees work on social media that has the BJA quality standard, that they know that it's reliable research that's gone through a standardized peer review process, that experts have looked at it and said that this is reliable, ethical, quality research. I think all we can do really is then present that and put it in a format that can be clearly and easily digested. You're then sort of letting go to an extent. And we do have some interaction with comments where either authors or the journal are engaging with some comments on social media, and we're lucky that we don't get a lot of spam comments or trolling or aggressive comments to our feeds, which is good. One of the ways that we try to manage this is that we do have events where we invite authors to be involved in a conversation, which is a sort of analogue of the traditional correspondence, but in a much shortened and more timely format. And these social media chats have been really well liked by both authors and readers. One of the problems that we have had is that in the last 12 months, with a lot of changes in the social media landscape, a lot of authors have been unhappy or disinclined to engage with X. And that's why we have seen that the BJA shift towards Blue Sky, and we'll be bringing out a new series of Blue Sky chats which replace our X chats in the coming months.
That's another interesting shift that you described quite well. But I think following on from that, is there a risk that X, formerly Twitter with its strict character count, which is a similar system to Blue Sky, which may or may not replace that space, is there a risk of important information being lost in that, if you like, very succinct summary of what's probably a much, much bigger information piece?
Yes, absolutely. I think there is a danger of loss of detail, and that really is what I found as the social media editor. And one of the things we train our social media fellows to do is to really summarize sometimes difficult scientific content into a small amount of characters, and that is a real challenge. One of the ways we can get around that is by having threads where you have multiple posts, and these chat events also allow more dialogue. But certainly the BJA, we're now moving towards visual and video abstracts. And one of the things that our authors will be seeing in the next few months are invitations to contribute a video abstract, where the author is given the opportunity to talk for up to 2 minutes and 10 seconds on their work, which is usually enough time to get across the key message.
Will authors have any training or support to help develop those?
Yeah, absolutely. We provide guidance on that from the authors, and this is after the paper's gone through peer review and is accepted. So hopefully there will be a clear, concise message by that point.
So you do other things, Tom, apart from being the social media editor of the BJA, and you've completed a PhD and are now embarking on a new program of research. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So I'm a clinician scientist. I completed my postgraduate medical training about 12 months ago. As part of that, I was on the NIHR postdoctoral training program. For international listeners, that's the National Institute for Health and Care Research in the UK. I had a clinical lectureship, which meant I had half of my time spent doing research training postdoctoral with the end of my clinical training. And in the last 12 months, I was appointed to a substantive, so permanent clinical academic post at Queen Mary University of London, which means I get to spend half of my time doing research in addition to my clinical work. And what I'm doing at the moment is setting up a platform trial.
What is a platform trial, Tom?
It's a difficult concept to summarize very succinctly, but the way I would describe our platform is we're providing a common research infrastructure to deliver clinical research questions. The analogy that I use is that when we're delivering a traditional clinical trial, whether it's a parallel group trial, in terms of research governance, we are effectively building an entire football stadium to play a football match, a single football match. And then when the trial is finished, we dismantle that stadium, which is enormously inefficient, both in terms of time and cost. What we're doing in the platform trial is building a stadium that we can play multiple football matches on. And the aim is that we'll set up the Perioperative, our platform, short form Protect platform, and we'll use that to undertake multiple clinical trials.
Are you interested in a particular outcome or particular disease or surgical process?
We are interested in improving the quantity and the quality of life for patients that have surgery. And we've designed the Protect platform to be specifically broad in its remit, which allows us to adapt to future changes in health or health research questions, which is an enormous strength of our project, rather than restricting it to a very narrow research area. So we're starting by looking at a clinical trial of ibuprofen to prevent postoperative pain. And we're also looking at high-flow nasal oxygen to prevent respiratory complications after surgery. And then we've also had a trial recently funded to look at whether to stop or continue renin-angiotensin system inhibitors during the perioperative period.
They are some of the big questions in medicine, aren't they? As a consumer of non-steroidals, because of my inept sporting pursuits, I must say I think they're great, but there's all those concerns about renal damage and about anastomotic breakdown and about bone healing. Which surgical group are you going to look at?
This research question is being led by my colleague Caroline Thomas from Leeds University Hospitals. Caroline's done an awful lot of background work in reviewing the literature, working with patients to identify a treatment regime that is acceptable to both clinicians and researchers. And the group we're focusing on patients undergoing colorectal surgery where there is expected to be an anastomosis. And one of the safety outcomes we're looking at is whether or not that affects the outcome of the surgery, specifically anastomotic leak, but also AKI, renal damage, and whether there's a benefit in reduction in morphine consumption or morphine equivalent consumption.
Excellent. That sounds interesting, Andy.
Well, I should declare an interest. We're going to help Tom in Southampton, hopefully running some of these arms. So really interesting to us, and really interesting to hopefully get the platform up and running in the UK.
It's interesting with platform trials because people can be initially worried that they will stifle research outside the centre where they've been set up. But in fact, the opposite can be true, bringing in both established and emerging researchers and involving the universities of those researchers in the sponsorship or support of these trials. And the UK has got some great funding systems to get all sorts of hospitals, academic, district general hospitals, specialist hospitals on board.
That's absolutely right. We would see, and the aim for the Protect platform is to enable collaborative research outside of our organisation. We have already got a number of UK centres that have signed up to take part in the trial, like Andy's hospital in Southampton, which we're enormously grateful to. But the purpose is to try to enable researchers to undertake their research questions using the infrastructure and to save them the 12 to 18 months of setup that would ordinarily have to happen for clinical trials. So we hope that we can deliver research more quickly and more cheaply.
And how are you incorporating social media into your platform?
We're using social media to disseminate our research to patients and clinicians, to engage with patients through mechanisms we've already discussed, but also to identify centres that may want to take part. We found that an enormously helpful tool in other trials.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a nice segue towards the end of our podcast, Andy.
Yes, indeed. As always, thank you very much for listening to us here on Topmed Talk. Thank you for joining us here, Tom. And for listeners, you know this by now, but you can find us on our website. You can find us on social media. We're on all the socials that Tom's been talking about, including the new Blue Sky and YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and X, formerly Twitter. And whichever one you use, please do hit like, please do hit subscribe. It really makes a difference to us at this end for all the reasons that Tom's just very nicely explained. And really, really importantly, a huge thanks, as always, to our sponsors this year. That's GE and BD Advanced Patient Monitoring that help keep Topmed Talk free and open access around the world.
And we'd love to thank the BJA trustees for allowing us to interview the wonderful members of the BJA team.
Topmed Talk.
Topmed Talk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, evidence-based perioperative medicine. And this year, it's your chance to join clinicians from around the world at the EBPOM World Congress 2026 at the British Library in London. Between the 7th and the 9th of July, you will have 3 days of evidence-based perioperative medicine, global insights, and expert debate, featuring speakers including Michael Marmot, and Ken Rockwood. It is the main event of the year in perioperative medicine. We want to see you there, and I'm excited to tell you, super early bird registration is still available all the way up until the 31st of January. Register now at ebpom.org.